Mokuba was crying in pain. Seto was laughing at him and threw him to the ground as hard as he could. Mokuba's head hit the wooden floor very hard. From Mokuba was crying in pain to blah 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 hit the wooden floor very hard, that's all one sentence. It needs to be broken up. Seto then began to kick and punch him everywhere. He punched him in the nose. His nose was bleeding, and then Seto punched his mouth and a tooth came out. Seto took off Mokuba's shirt and rolled Mokuba to his back. Seto took off his belt and started to whip Mokuba. I forgot to capitalize the M in Mokuba. Mokuba was screaming in pain. Please, Seto, stop. It hurts. Please stop. You're hurting me. Seto stopped after whipping Mokuba for 10 minutes. And they didn't actually spell out the word minutes. They just have it say 10 mins, and they don't have a space between 10 and mins. Don't abbreviate stuff like that in stories, please. It looks really unprofessional and sloppy. Mokuba's back was all bloody. Seto used the side of the belt that had the big metal piece on it. Mokuba was coughing and blood was coming out when he did. Mokuba passed out from pain and laid there in a puddle of his own blood. And why is the B in blood capitalized? Seto walked away from Mokuba, and I forgot to capitalize the M on Mokuba, and if I'm mangling their names, I'm very sorry, and began to think of what he had just done, but it didn't bother him too much. Wrong! 2. You need 2 O's, not 1. Seto just went into his room and threw some things. Why is there an apostrophe S? Some things, does it own something? I don't know. You don't even need the S anyway. It threw something around the room and then passed out. That would make more sense than having it threw some things around the room and passed out. I mean, seriously, how can you make... Let's continue. Mokuba lay there in that blood all night until it was 4 a.m. He struggled to get up, holding his sides from where Seto had kicked him. They forgot to capitalize the S in Seto. Mokuba is now standing in his blood. He went to walk to the bathroom to wash off his blood since he had to go to school in a few hours. As he walked, there were bloody footprints he had left all the way from the puddle of blood to the bathroom. He got into the tub and began to wash all the blood off. By the time he was done, blood was all through the water. Wrong, through. They pretty much did the through and not the other through. The whipping had really dug into his skin, causing him much pain and blood loss. The bleeding from some of his cuts on his back began to stop, but others were too deep, wrong too, to stop without stitches. Mokuba didn't know how to stitch, so he got a whole bunch of his white bandages and wrapped them around his back. He got dressed and ready for school. That's the end of chapter 1. Let's go on to chapter 2. Neglect. Chapter 2. Oh boy. Mokuba limped downstairs and went into the kitchen trying to find something to eat because he was so hungry he didn't eat since yesterday at breakfast. All he was able to find was a moldy loaf of bread and a box of cereal with bugs in it. Lovely. He didn't know how to cook anything else besides that. So he just went off to school with his stomach growling. He was walking to school once again in much pain, though. His best friend Toby came running beside him once he saw Mokuba walking to school. Whoa, Mokuba, how'd you get that shiner? Why is this person writing in all caps? And where the hell is the punctuation marks? And why isn't this, spoken sentence separate from the paragraph? He was talking about his black eye where Seto punched him. People, please capitalize the first letter of someone's name. I fell is all I said. They have all I said. They have is all I said in the quotation. So it sounds like he actually says to his friend, quote unquote, I fell is all I said. And now it's going back to first person. I don't want anyone to know my big brother has gotten into beating me up. It would anger him and ruin his reputation. Toby and Mokuba arrived at school now. Again, it switches back and forth between... Mokuba walked into the room behind Toby and sat down on a chair. The teacher saw Mokuba and asked him, "How'd you get that black eye, sweetie?" Wow! Is that an actual punctuation mark? I sat down at my desk and told her I fell. She looked at me with concern. It was now lunchtime. Mokuba... This is getting ridiculous how quickly it's switching from first person to third person. Mokuba couldn't get any food because his brother didn't give him any money. So he just sat there in the lunchroom next to Toby and talked. "Why aren't you eating anything, Mokuba?" And they have this... Okay, first of all, they forgot to capitalize the M in Mokuba, and second of all, they have the question mark after the quotations. It's supposed to be inside the quotations. "I'm not hungry" is all. And where's the period at the end of that? The bell rang, and now it was time for class. The children all walked back to their wrong version of there. It's supposed to be T-H-E-I-R, not T-H-E-R-E. Walked back to their class, including Mokuba. And why aren't they capitalizing the M in Mokuba? After that class was over, it was now time for recess. All the children went outside and played, but Mokuba just sat up against a tree. Okay, they forgot to capitalize the M in Mokuba, but they have the T in tree capitalized. Why? Toby came over and asked, "Do you want to come play tag?" Again, they have the question mark outside the quotations. I shook my head. "No thanks, Toby." Oh wow, why am I not shocked? It went back to first person. "What's the matter with you? You've been acting weird all day." "I love the lack of punctuation there," Toby asked. "It's nothing, Toby. You forgot to put an apostrophe for it's. You know, if you didn't have the apostrophe there, it'd be it is nothing, Toby. But to make it simpler, it's nothing, Toby. So where the hell's the apostrophe?" "It's nothing, Toby. I'm just tired today. I just want to rest." No punctuations in there whatsoever. "Okay," Toby said. Oh, and I love how they didn't use a comma. The bell rang and it was time to go back inside for our next class. And no, it's not R, it's A-R-E. Like, who are you? Don't you mean for the next class? I mean, this is getting ridiculous. We all went inside. Or maybe it is supposed to be the other R, like, you know, yours, mine, and ours. But because they spelled it wrong, it's hard to tell. The only reason why I could tell it was that one is because it went back to first person with "we all went inside." I sat down and the class began. A few mins in... Don't you mean minutes? Stop abbreviating. Let's continue. A few minutes in, comma, a boy behind me yelled, "Mokuba, your back is bleeding. Blood is coming through the back of your shirt." Okay, let's take a look at what's wrong with this entire thing. Mokuba should be separated from the rest of the sentence with a comma or an exclamation point. Your back is bleeding. Oh, I guess that part's okay, but you spelled coming wrong. It's supposed to be C-O-M-I-N-G. You don't need the extra M in there. Wrong version of through. It's not the throwing things through. It's supposed to be, you know, like seeping through. And why is there a colon after the exclamation point? What sense does that make? My eyes got wide. The teacher was coming over to me. She told me to stand up, and I did. She pulled up the back of my shirt and looked at my back. She gasped, "Mokuba, what happened to your back? It's all bloody and it looks like these cuts are going to scar you. These bandages are soaked with blood, Mokuba." I'm not gonna bother. I just held my head down, trying to hold back tears into so much pain. Into so much pain? Don't you mean in so much pain? I started to cry and cry. You don't need "and cry." You should just have to say, "I started to cry." The whole school heard my cries. I fell to my knees and began to cry even harder. A man rushed into the room and picked me up and rushed me to the nurse's office until the ambulance came. The young man who carried me was a teacher from across the hall. He looked to be in his 20s. And how relevant is that? The ambulance had finally arrived to take me to the hospital. Mokuba... Stop going from first person to third person. Oh, great. Now I have a stupid fingerprint. Oh, screw it. I can do the review without them. The ambulance finally arrived, taking me to the hospital. Mokuba was in the hospital now. He was in so much pain he felt them stitching up his back. Seto came in after he heard the news. Seto was so sad he couldn't believe his eyes. He looked down at Mokuba and asked, "Who did this to you?" Okay, please, capitalize the M in Mokuba, and after the word ask, have it be a comma, not a period. Mokuba thought to himself, Seto must have been too drunk to remember him beating me. First of all, Seto, the S in Seto should be capitalized. Second of all, it should be Ben and not B. And thirdly, too drunk. It should have two O's. Two O's. How the hell could you mess up with something like this? I was done being stitched. The doctor looked at me and asked me if I knew who did this. I love my brother and I don't want him to get into trouble. I shook my head. No, I don't know who did this. Setu took Mokuba back home after he was done getting stitched. When they got home, Setu asked Mokuba again they lack capitalizing the M in Mokuba, who did this to you? And again, the stupid question mark is after the parentheses, or the quotations, I'm sorry. Mokuba looked up at Seto, trembling and trying not to cry. Who did this to you, Mokuba? Tell me now. Mokuba said in a soft whisper, you. Seto's eyes got wide. What do you mean I did this to you, Mokuba? You did, Seto. You got drunk and you beat me real bad. I love how the quotations don't end. The sentence starts off with a quotation and then you never see the quotation again. Seto stared at Mokuba and said, Mokuba, I'm so sorry, and this is lacking quotations altogether. Seto's eyes teared up because of what he'd done to this little child. Not to just any child, but his brother. Seto knows that Mokuba was in pain and getting tired, so Seto picked him up and carried him upstairs into bed.